everyone. Thank you so much, Creative Minds, for inviting me to speak here, and for all my friends and family who came out too. It's so incredible to be able to speak to this group of all these creative minds. So I'm Paige, Wright, and I founded a tour company. How do I do this? Okay. I founded a tour company, Walk and Talk Charleston, 4 years ago. I'm a born and raised New Yorker with deep Southern roots and island ties. I feel like this gives me a unique perspective. I studied history and art history at the University of Virginia, and it was two of my favorite professors that formerly worked at the Historic Charleston Foundation. They taught a class on arts and culture, architectural history and culture of the antebellum South. And this class had an enormous impact on the way I understand the built environment of Charleston and my interpretations of the city. I feel truly honored that I get to tour the city with visitors as a profession. Folklore is something that we grapple with every day. So let's get started on this topic with a quote from JFK. He said that all history is gossip. And we believe that history is told all history is told from someone's perspective. And so it's our core philosophy at Walk and Talk that we're talking history and historic gossip. Think about the media for a moment. We know that if we read 5 different headlines about the same contemporary topic from 5 different publications, we'll have 5 very different understandings of the topic. This is what we need to keep in mind about primary sources and documents that were recording the past, as well as the oral stories that are passed down. With an inquiring outlook, we can take into account the bias of these sources. And our next quote is from Mark Twain. He said, "Never let the truth interfere with a good story." We see our role as first being educators and secondarily as entertainers. We often do things just for their entertainment or their story value. There's a rich and ancient history of embellishing oral stories. Legends and lore are just as important as historic facts because they tell us about our points of view of past events, and our values are revealed by the stories we choose to tell. I recently went to a lecture with the Charleston Tour Association, and the topic was 2 truths and a lie. It was a lecture given by a descendant of Magnolia Plantation. The oral stories that had been passed down until this generation were eventually disproven because of a good cocktail party debate and inquisitive minds. Of course, they now tell the more complete story, but there is still value in the original story because of all the reasons we just talked about. It unveils their ancestors' values and bias, and how it takes an analytical person to take another look at something you thought you knew. At Walk and Talk, I love to do my own research, but I'm happy to have a team. Noelle's here today, and Anna's behind the scenes, and Jim, and of course, Elliot. We all challenge each other. We all have different perspectives, and so we have different interpretations and can often help find the missing documentation on some of our favorite Charleston stories. Some of our favorite examples of legends growing stronger in the public memory than truth include the stories of Paint Blue and Charleston Green, 2 of our historic paint colors, and then the story of Madame Grace Michelotto, and the stories of pirates who plundered our coast. So let's get a start with Paint Blue. And we'll get back to the idea of the concept of public memory and how that relates to historic Charleston. So this audience being mostly engaged locals, I expect that you probably know the true roots of Paint Blue the true roots of the blue ceilings, porches, and piazzas in our city really lie in Lgbtq culture. I get asked daily by visitors, why are the ceilings blue? Is it I heard it was keep the bugs away. And we acknowledge that so much of what we think of as historic Charleston or Southern culture must really be attributed to the Lgbtq customs that stem from their ancestral belief systems in West Africa. Paint Blue is a great example of this cultural appropriation. I always tee this story up on my tours as I don't think that the most natural application of this West African tradition is the porch ceiling of the big house. Blue was thought to repel evil spirits, such as hags and haints. Some theorize that blue is a sacred color in their ancestral tradition, or that the spirits would confuse the blue for water or the sky, and that because hags or haints were trapped spirits, they could not cross either the sky or this water. enslaved Africans in the southern U.S. began to use the blue pigment left over from indigo vats in the dyeing process to seal entrances to their dwellings against these spirits, painting their doors and window frames blue. Evidence has been found of enslaved persons' quarters painted blue on the wall that faced their enslaver's home, suggesting the use of anything at hand to create a spiritual defense. Today, this color has been become a design trend, as we see with the Sherwin-Williams paint collection. In many African American communities today, we still see the window and door trim painted blue. And for the 40th anniversary of Michelotto Festival, there were 9 houses of significance to African American history in the city that were painted in West African motifs along the lines of Jonathan Green's incredible set work for the show. And there's one on Queen Street that's still painted that you can go check out today. So moving on to Charleston Green. So Charleston Green is this very dark, almost black shade of green that we often see on doors and shutters here. You can almost barely tell the difference. I like to point it out on this house because the S-hooks are black, but the shutters are green, and same with the ironwork is generally black. And the house next to it you can barely see in this picture, but that actually has black shutters. So it can be very difficult to tell the difference. It's really that dark. And the history of this color is heavily debated. I was researching it up until last night, trying to I've heard so many stories, and I tell both of them, and I had recently thought that just one was the right one, but now I've kind of come to understand that maybe there's room for both, and maybe there were actually 2 different colors. So the first is the story that during Reconstruction, the Union sent black paint to help the South rebuild. Charlestonians found this unattractive and rebelliously added a little yellow paint. And this would both extend the paints and change the color, making a unique dark green. You can see this as Charleston seeking to create an identity separate from the Union and perpetuating this rebel culture. The legend likely persisted as a morale booster for the South. The idea of changing a bitter gift and making it their own might help soothe the wounded pride. Critics of the story say that black pigments were generally the easiest to source and would not have been particularly helpful, and that it was unlikely that the Union would have really participated too much in the rebuilding or could have afforded to. That being said, there are many historians that I respect that include this story in their interpretations, and I can imagine the federal government sending some black paint as a symbolic middle finger back to Charleston. The other story is that historians and paint analysts have found that there was a vertigo screen, that this might be the true original Charleston green. It was a very chromatic green, and it was bright and glossy, and it was pigmented with copper. Of course, copper would have patinaed over time to this very, very dark green. My interpretation is that what's old is very prestigious, and that perhaps this black with a little bit of yellow would have been created to, replicate this patinaed vertigo screen. So, next up we have the Madam. She's one of my favorite people to talk about. This is the big brick on what's now Fulton Street. It was Beresford Street when she bought this property. And so Madam Grace Michelotto, she was born in St. Thomas. She moved to Charleston before her first year. She was from a prominent Jewish family. Her dad was the musical director of the synagogue. And she was very entrepreneurial. She purchased this property for $2,000 and then built 3 buildings on it. She became very wealthy from her enterprises. And at one point she owned over 7 enslaved peoples throughout her lifetime. Prostitution was a legal gray area in Charleston, and she would be charged with running a disorderly house. And so she'd talk back to the officers and be like, hey, look, I know you have the right to come bust me up every once in a while, and I'm happy to pay my fines, but I take great offense to you saying I run a disorderly house. She goes, I want you to know I have the finest and politest whores this side of the place. The Madam Belle in Gone with the Wind is based on her. In life, like in the movie, she had a high-class salon on the first floor and private rooms upstairs. Apparently, privacy was by no means the norm in many of these establishments, so it gives you a little bit of an idea of maybe how this movie gave us some misconceptions of the antebellum South. And another one of our favorite sayings is that you can't study American history without studying the Madams because of how much power and influence they had over the powerful and influential. The legend has it that upon her death, everyone wanted to pay their respects, but the synagogue wouldn't accept her because of her line of work, and other places of worship felt similarly. So it was the Unitarians that took her in, and that she had the largest funeral procession in Charleston history, longer than even John Calhoun's, but no one could be seen at her funeral, so they sent their empty carriages in support. I've loved telling this story for a long time. It turns out it's not true. So, it has been found that she did, in fact, marry Mr. Jacob Myers, who then served as executor of her estate. And in both her obituary and in her will and on her gravestone, she is Mrs. Jacob Myers. And she's actually buried in the Magnolia Cemetery, not the Unitarian Cemetery. Stories of her scandalous life are told with embellishment and glamour and sass that make her stories simply more fun. We love the idea of the celebration of an imperfect hero, a woman who did so much wrong, but also made a damn good story of her life. Moving on to the pirates. We have whores and pirates. This is a great morning. So, this is 141 to 145 Church Street, affectionately known as the Pirate House. And there's a story that there were tunnels that went from that house directly out to the bay so that pirates could come and make backroom deals with merchants or stay in this house instead of plundering the ships. This part of the story seemed to start to circulate mid-last century, and it was around 1928 that the wife of the former mayor, Mrs. Goodwin Rhett, bought this house. So it's quite possible that she was the source of this story, and it turns out her ancestor is the one who caught the pirates. So we've never found any evidence of the pirate tunnels. But the story of Stede Bonnet is pervasive. And so Stede Bonnet was known as the gentleman pirate, and he was caught on the Cape Fear River in 1718 by Captain William Wright. And I was like, why did they call him the gentleman pirate? Because they please may I board your ship, or thanks for all that booty. But it turned out he'd been a landowner in the Caribbean, so he was considered a gentleman. And when he's brought to Charleston, he has dinner with the judge. The judge is like, it's so unusual for a man of your class to become a pirate. What happened here? Did you lose your money? And he said, no. If you knew my wife, you would know that I just had to get away and try something wild. This did not impress the judge. He was tried and hung with the rest of his crew and left out for days to really warn other pirates. And the story is that he was buried underneath what's now White Point Gardens, where the original seawall would have been. Of course, we know that a lot of pirates also had same-sex relationships. It was entirely possible that he was leaving his wife to pursue something else. Where are we? His story is so compelling that Our Flag Means Death is a new HBO series that has been created about him. So Hollywood is, of course, one of the major perpetuators of our legends and adapting these oral stories. So, in conclusion, we believe in sharing stories in the context in which they were recorded, and encourage you to examine what you know both in history and in life for biases in the recording and retelling. Tall tales and legends can be fun. Entertainment has always been a vital part of storytelling. The point of this fact-checking lecture has not been to put down the importance of folklore, but to show how it complements and enhances our understanding of history. It's important to tell the whole story and to acknowledge when we're entertaining with a legend versus when we're talking about something that's based on historic fact. History is written by the winners, but also by the privileged. Here's the back cover of a book by Stephanie Ewell. The Preservation Society invited her to speak to their membership a few years ago, and it's a lecture that really, really stuck with me. So I'm going to talk to you about her book on public memory. I'm going to pull up the back cover of it. It says, Charleston, South Carolina today enjoys a reputation as a destination city for cultural and heritage tourism. In a golden haze of memory, Stephanie E. Ewell looks back to the crucial period between 1920 and 1940, when local leaders developed Charleston's trademark image as America's most historic city. Eager to assert the national value of their regional cultural traditions and to situate Charleston as a bulwark against the chaos of modern America, these descendants of old-line families downplayed Confederate associations and emphasized the city's colonial and early national prominence. They created a vibrant network of individual artists, literary figures, and organizations, such as the White Society for the Preservation of Negro Spirituals, that nurtured architectural preservation, art, literature, and tourism while appropriating African-American folk culture. In the process, they translated their selective and idiosyncratic personal, familial, and class memories into a collective identity for the city. The Charleston this group built, Ewell argues, presented a sanitized yet highly marketable version of the American past. Their efforts invited attention and praise from outsiders while protecting social hierarchies and preserving the political and economic power of whites. Through the example of this colorful southern city, Ewell posits a larger critique about the use of heritage and demonstrates how something as intangible as the recalled past can be transformed into real political, economic, and social power. So lore and legends tell us something about ourselves too, revealing the zeitgeist of the region and age in which they are developed. We can examine legends to learn otherwise unwritten fears, hopes, and values of our society. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh yeah, this is her info. And thank you, Tyler. I could listen to you talk all day, and I'm gonna book a tour as soon as possible. Maybe I'll get my Creative Mornings team, and we'll do a whole group. How big are the groups?
We can have up to 20 people on a group, but we also offer private groups if you're looking for a more intimate experience. And I love sharing history, and I have a lot of team members that are training with me now, so you'll see some more faces soon.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm trying to pull up our Q&A slide, but we're just going to kick it off to the audience. Just raise your hand, and you can ask Tyler some questions.
Hi.
Hi, good morning. I wanted to know, I'm Marquita. I wanted to know the history of the Lid Lady and your pattern of wearing a hat for every time.
Okay, awesome. So the Lid Lady was actually my late mother's nickname, and so I affectionately adopted it. I was kind of looking for a shtick when I was, doing my marketing, and I had picked out all the various locations for the tour, and I was like, the Hat Man is, one of my favorite little quirky Charlestonisms. That would be a great place to start. And if we're starting at the Hat Man, let's be the Lid Lady, and bring mom's personality into this. Yeah, Stephanie.
Hey, so I have to imagine that when you tell people, especially during Charlestonians, what you do, they maybe retell you some folklore and stories. What's kind of like, or what are some like outlandish things that you've heard? Or I'm sure you just nod and say, oh yeah, but maybe like the craziest or funniest like folklore that you've heard from people.
I get a lot of, it's always been named this, and I'm like, actually, Hampton Park has had 5 different names in its lifetime kind of thing. So I would say that when I get stories like that, thankfully I know a good bit, and I can kind of offer some more information than they might have. And so, like I said earlier, I think our main role is educators, and I don't know if any of you saw the documentary at where did we go, Elliot? The the Terrace Theater, but they played an excellent documentary recently, and it was about racism in America and like what's going to tip us forward this time. We're at a turning point right now, and what's going to bring us, over the curve instead of pushing backwards. And my personal belief is that it's going to be education. That education is the most important thing we need to focus on. Any other questions? Yes?
Why Charleston, not Savannah or St. Augustine?
Oh, so I hope to be able to expand to other cities one day. But I was lucky enough to visit Charleston in college, and we obviously spent a lot of time studying it in the class that I found so captivating. And then my sister came to school down here, and now the whole family is here, like you see with so many transplant families in Charleston. I just really fell in love with the city. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Hi.
If we're newer to Charleston, what are some ways we can get to know the city better besides going to your tours, which I've always enjoyed?
Yeah. I would say going to any of our other cultural institutions. I really enjoy, I would say, downtown. I love the Aiken Red House. I think they do an excellent interpretation, and I like their style of preservation as found versus reconstruction of what had been there. I really appreciate the Old Slave Mart Museum. And then I like the McLeod Plantation. It's told entirely from the perspective of the enslaved. It's trying to model itself after Whitney Plantation in Louisiana. And then Drayton Hall, because I'm a big architecture nut. And that one is the oldest example of Palladian architecture in the United States. And I think those are really amazing. And of all the places I've been to, I think those give the best interpretation. Any other questions? Oh, hi.
Okay, as a fellow New Yorker,
Yes.
best bagel in Charleston.
Oh.
Go to New York.
Although they're opening that bagel spot.
Holy City.
Yeah, Holy City.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a try.
I mean, if any of the bagel places want to donate to Creative Mornings, we'll gladly accept it.
Hi.
Will you share a little bit about your Real Rainbow Road Tour?
Yes. So a friend of mine, this information was all put together by the College of Charleston and Charleston Green and his team at the Special Collections Library. And so it's all publicly available. And a friend of mine that's also a friend of that department asked if I would be one of the tour operators. So I give the Real Rainbow Row, and it's the LGBTQ plus history tour of Charleston. I offer it once a month on second Sundays, and generally in connection with Pride Week in Charleston. And it's a give back tour. All the proceeds from that tour go back to support the South Carolina LGBTQ archive at the College of Charleston and their Special Collections Library. Thanks for asking that. Yeah, we also do a shopping tour with Middle King Street, and Stephanie and I love going to a meditation studio called Still Soul Studio, and we do a Zen tour. We try to do it once a month, but if you don't see it on the schedule, reach out and I'll get one going.
How far do you walk on these tours?
Great question.
How many steps do you get?
It depends on how many questions you ask, Christy. But the full route is about 2 miles and over 2 hours, just at 2 hours. So a nice slow pace. Yeah.
Perfect. One last question, anyone? Who's booking a tour? Raise your hand, right? Yeah.
Awesome.
We're going. Okay, well, thank you, Tyler.
Thank you so
and
much.
funny enough, Tyler and I are from the same hometown, but it took this opportunity for us to actually officially meet.
I love it.
So,
Well, thank you
you
so
never
much.
know what Creative Mornings can do.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You. Sarah, do you want to come back up? Oh, is that it? Oh, I guess we're done.